I tried for years without results, but why did everything change after I met a boy who claimed he was me before life broke me? I met the boy on a Tuesday, sitting on a rusted green bench in the park where I used to hide from the world, and he was wearing the exact same striped polo shirt I had worn in my third-grade school photo. At 32, I was a man who had exhausted every ounce of hope I had, living in a studio apartment that smelled like stale coffee and disappointment, convinced that the universe had simply forgotten my address. To understand why this encounter shattered me, you have to understand the decade of silence that came before it. I wasn't lazy. In fact, I was the hardest worker I knew. I was a painter, not a hobbyist, but a man who believed art was his oxygen. For 10 years, I had woken up at 4 a.m., painted until my fingers cramped, went to a soul-crushing job at a logistics warehouse, and then painted again until midnight. I did everything the books told me to do. I networked until my smile felt glued on. I submitted portfolios to galleries in New York, London, and Berlin. I built a website. I posted on social media. I hustled, and in return, I got absolutely nothing. Not a single gallery representation. Not a single sale over $50. Just a stack of rejection letters thick enough to stop a bullet. My parents, Robert and Linda, were supportive in that heartbreaking, silent way. They would come over for dinner, look at the canvases stacking up against my peeling walls, and Dad would just sigh and ask if the warehouse was offering overtime. They loved me, but they didn't believe in me anymore. And honestly, I didn't blame them. I had become a ghost in my own life, a machine of effort with zero output. I was bitter, cynical, and convinced that talent was a lie rich people told to keep the rest of us hoping. Have you ever poured your entire soul into something, only to have the world look at it and shrug? That Tuesday, I had just received the final blow. A prestigious gallery I had been courting for 3 years sent me a generic email saying my work lacked authentic spirit. Authentic spirit. After I had bled onto those canvases, I walked to the park, sat on that wet bench, and decided that was it. I was going to quit. I was going to go home, burn the brushes, and ask for a full-time shift at the warehouse. That's when I noticed him. He was sitting on the other end of the bench, legs swinging, too short to touch the ground. He looked about 10 years old. He had messy brown hair, a scab on his left knee, and that striped shirt. I looked away at first, not wanting to deal with a kid. But then I saw what he was holding. It was a sketchbook, a black, hardcover sketchbook with a silver sticker on the corner. My stomach dropped. I had owned that exact sketchbook when I was 10. I had bought it with birthday money from my grandmother. I stared at him, and he turned to look at me. His eyes were my eyes. Not similar, identical. The same hazel mix of green and brown, but without the dark circles and the deadness that 32 years of life had put into mine. He didn't say hello. He just held up the drawing he was working on. It was a picture of a tree, the old oak tree that stood in the center of this very park. But he hadn't drawn it like a tree. He had drawn it like an explosion of green fire, vibrant and chaotic. It was the first drawing I had ever been proud of. I remembered drawing it. I remembered the smell of the crayons. I remembered feeling like I had captured magic on paper. I asked him, trembling, where he got that book. He didn't answer the question. He just looked at the drawing and said that he was going to be the greatest artist in the world because he could see things other people couldn't. It felt like a hallucination. I thought maybe the stress had finally snapped my mind. What would you do in this situation? Would you run, or would you stay and talk to the ghost of your past? I stayed. Over the next few weeks, I went back to that bench every day after work, and every day, the boy, let's call him Leo, though he never gave me a name, was there. It wasn't a peaceful reunion. It was a confrontation. I was angry at him. I looked at this kid, bursting with naive confidence, and I wanted to shake him. I wanted to tell him that the world didn't care about his vision. I wanted to tell him that in 20 years, he would be broke, lonely, and tired. I wanted to protect him by crushing his hope before the world could do it for him. I told him about the rejection letters. I told him about the gallery directors who didn't even look him in the eye. I told him that authentic spirit doesn't pay the rent. Leo didn't get sad. He didn't get scared. He just looked at me with this confused expression, like I was speaking a foreign language. He asked me why I cared what the gallery people thought. He asked me if I still liked the smell of the paint. He asked me if I still felt the buzz in my chest when I mixed a new color. I told him to grow up. I told him that painting wasn't about the buzz, it was about the result. It was about success. And then he said the thing that broke me. He looked down at his sketchbook, traced the line of that oak tree, and said that he didn't draw for the gallery people. He drew because if he didn't, his head would explode with all the colors. He said he felt sorry for me because I had turned the only thing I loved into a job I hated. I went home that night and stared at my studio. For the first time, I really looked at my paintings. They were technically perfect. The lighting was correct, the anatomy was flawless, the composition was balanced. But they were cold. They were desperate. They were paintings made by a man begging to be liked. They were screaming, please approve of me, instead of declaring, this is who I am. I realized Leo was right. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped painting for the boy who saw trees as green fire. I had started painting for the critics, the agents, and the parents who worried. I had been trying to paint results. Have you ever realized that your greatest obstacle wasn't the world, but your own desperation to please it? I decided to try an experiment. I wasn't going to quit, but I wasn't going to try to succeed anymore either. I was going to paint for Leo. I took a fresh canvas. I didn't plan it. I didn't think about what was marketable. I just remembered the feeling of sitting on that bench when I was 10, feeling the wind, seeing the light hit the leaves. I grabbed a palette knife and started slashing color onto the canvas. I used the wrong colors. I ignored the rules of perspective. I made a mess, and for the first time in a decade, I felt it. The buzz, the electric current running from my chest to my hand. I painted until sunrise, covered in blue and gold, exhausting myself not out of discipline, but out of joy. I went back to the park the next day to show Leo. I wanted to show him that I remembered. I wanted to tell him he was right. But the bench was empty. I waited for hours. I went back every day for a week. I asked the hot dog vendor if he had seen a kid in a striped shirt. He looked at me like I was crazy and said no one had sat on that bench but me for months. I went to my parents' house that weekend. I went up to the attic and dug through the old boxes of my childhood stuff. I found it at the bottom of a plastic bin, the black sketchbook with the silver sticker. I opened it to the first page. There was the drawing of the tree, the explosion of green fire. The boy hadn't been a ghost. He hadn't been a time traveler. He was a manifestation of the part of me I had murdered, the part of me that believed in magic. My mind had projected him because it was the only way to save my life. I had been so broken that I needed to externalize my own innocence just to have a conversation with it. Everything changed after that, not the world. The world was still hard. The warehouse job still sucked. The bills were still high. But I had changed. I stopped sending portfolios. I stopped networking. I just painted. I painted weird, chaotic, vibrant things that made no sense to anyone but me. I posted them online, not with 20 hashtags seeking attention, but just to catalog them. 3 months later, a woman messaged me. She wasn't a gallery owner. She was just a person who had stumbled across my page. She said my painting made her cry because it looked exactly like how grief felt to her. She wanted to buy it. She offered me more money than I made in a month at the warehouse. Then came another message. Then a small cafe asked to hang my work. Then a collective in the city invited me to a show, not because I fit their market, but because they had never seen anything like my style. The prestigious gallery that rejected me. They called 6 months later. They said they had heard a buzz about my new work. They said it finally had authentic spirit. I declined their offer. I didn't need them anymore. I realized that for 10 years, I had been chasing a reflection in a mirror that didn't exist. I was trying to be the artist I thought they wanted, and the universe refused to reward a fake. It was only when I went back to the source, when I listened to the boy on the bench, that the dam broke. The boy didn't save me because he had a magic solution. He saved me because he reminded me that the result isn't the painting on the wall, the result is the feeling you get while making it. If you lose that, you've lost the game before you even start. I'm 34 now. I paint full-time. I still have hard days. I still get rejected, but whenever I feel that creeping cynicism, that desperate need for validation, I go back to the park. I sit on that green bench. The boy is never there anymore, but that's okay. I don't need to see him outside of me, because he's finally living inside me again. He was me before life broke me, and I had to let him break me all over again so I could heal the right way. Do you think you're still in touch with the person you were before the world told you who to be? If this story made you remember a dream you buried, or if it made you want to go find your own bench, please like, share, and subscribe. Let me know in the comments. What is the one thing you loved as a child that you stopped doing because you thought it wasn't useful? Let's talk about it.